I'm going to give a very short update. I'll bring it down to about 10 minutes to catch up the lost time. We've had an intro, we've had the keynote, the amazing keynote by Barbara. We've looked at Akamai's clean energy procurement efforts. We've had the operator perspective from, it's not Gemini. That was a spell checker. I know how to write Gemini, but some clever spell checker put Gemini there, so Gemini. Sorry, Gemini. And then we've just had the fireside chat between Dom and Ian. And so in my very brief update, I'm not going to remind you, all of you, what greening of streaming is. There's a website, and you must reach out to us if you want to learn. I just remind you briefly, update you on who our members are, because the last time we gave a webinar, they weren't all there. Some have joined. We've had some turnover, so we've had a few major new in the large companies have joined. Arqiva in the UK and Eutelsat in France. And a few other smaller companies have joined, and you can see we're about 25 members and going strong. So when I said in the opening, it was great to see yesterday's MTSS event because it showed the communities there. Well, we're building a community. I just wanted to put some homage to all the people behind greening of streaming. So it's all of our members, but these are the members, the people who are actually helping run the show. So I'm lucky to be the president at the moment. We have our founder, Dom, Other executive committee members are Simon Jones, who's on holiday, but Mike, Barbara, Veronica Marfino is helping me with all aspects of running the organization and updating the strategy. We have a voluntary secretariat. There's John Behan, Rudolf van der Berg, Tim Siglin, and Andrew Ladbrook, who aren't here today, but who are active members there. And the people running our 7 working groups are Barbara, myself, Andrew, Simon, Dom, and Christoph Neumann from Broadpeak. So I just wanted to pay tribute to that. And quickly to update people on where we are with our energy collecting efforts. We have a project called REM. Before I show you REM, I'll just show you where we started. This is called the DOM diagram because he created this, I think, at the very start of greening of streaming, if not before. So basically, at this end, it should be on your left. You've got you're creating content, you're doing some kind of encoding or something. And at this end here, you're watching it on a display. And you can go through several dozen devices in the real world. And we said, how are we going to manage to capture the energy flowing from that beast? We have to somehow get our head around it. So we did a diagram that works in the same direction from the origination to the consumption. And we have these 4 basic categories: the encoder part, the blue is the CDN part, the ISP part, and everything that happens in people's homes, which is the home gateway, and all the devices, which can be things like connected TVs, mobile devices and stuff. Everything that's in bright green here, the fluorescent green, is what's operational and has been running for quite a few months. What's in light blue is what we're working on at the moment. We have 2 servers available and we're setting up software on them. We actually have multiple projects here. So we already have 2 live servers in Holland. We should get 2 in the UK eventually, and we're getting to 3 servers actually in Paris in the next few weeks to try and capture this part. And what's exciting about the way we do this is it enables us to do this, which is almost a year old, but not quite a year old, so I can show it. It's new from last year. I've shown this a lot, but it's just one example of what you get because you're doing live end-to-end. A lot of the data out there is all the data about this bit, all the data about that bit. But if you're not measuring it all together, you can't work things out like this to say, well, in an end-to-end stream, again, this is only the 2 termination points, the encoder and the devices at the end. You can see that when you're encoding, you can see this huge jump here on the bottom right. As you move from H.264 to H.265, you're adding like almost 100 watts to the encoding, the power required to encode. And we were expecting most devices, or if not all devices, to behave like this, basically no discernible difference. Sometimes the light blue's on top, sometimes the dark blue's on, but clearly that's just statistical errors. Basically, this device doesn't care whether it's getting H.265 or H.264. But then much more recent high-end devices, we were quite surprised to see a really notable jump in the H.265 to H.264 off a live thing. And this is not the kind of thing you can really do unless you're measuring end to end. So we're hoping in the next few weeks, worst case months, to add to this some CDN data as well, and it'll probably be the end of the year or next year we'll also have some ISP data live. Quickly, the very latest stuff, which is still to be fully digested, we're all on a Zoom call now, so this is a whole bunch of measurement from a Zoom hackathon we did, and you can see these orange lines separate, the vertical orange lines, all the different use cases, which are described very succinctly on top. And the way our system works at the moment, we can measure the energy every 20 seconds with a 1 watt accuracy. And so you can see sometimes you can't quite, there's a lot of straight lines, which don't really make sense. We don't quite know what that means. Straight lines that can sometimes go across different use cases. Or so some cases, so what you can see, if you look at the average power consumption, these were laptop PCs and MacBooks. You can see that there was a 10 watt in all these use cases jump with all these use cases. And it so happens that all these use cases had video off and all these use cases had video on. So when you're zooming, guys, you're basically probably consuming, again, we've got to run this again and be more precise, but you're probably consuming about 10 watts on your device by using video. And there's multiple millions of Zoom calls happening every day. So we get this kind of data, but as I say, it's limited. We can't quite make up what's going on because it's not precise enough. So we also have enabled, that's not fully integrated into our platform, it's a semi-manual process. We can do milliwatt measurements at 1 second intervals. And here you can see, whereas I was talking here, 10 watts, jump here. Well, the jump in this is from 24 watts to 25 watts up here. And you can see a screen here that is extremely reactive as long as you get the right scale. And as Hemini, Barbara, several people pointed out, Hemini, I think, when you are talking about screens, you are talking about literally billions of screens. So if you're doing something, if you're in charge of the World Cup and you do something that has this 1 or 2 watt difference on screens, well, you're talking several billion watts. So it can be significant. I said I go really, really fast, so I just want to tell you briefly about one other project that we're quite proud of. It's now with the IETF, so it's in a different time scale. I'm hoping it's going to move forward fast, but it was a simple question that Dom was asking for many years to different organizations, say, hey, we would really like, it's a really simple use case, to understand what's going on in streaming's energy, to be able to find any device that's in my network and say, hey, Mr. Router, hey, Mr. Set-top box, how much power are you using right now? Simple question. There's no way of doing that. And we sort of went round in circles, was Dom and people before me were, and so we carried on. And then we realized, well, nobody's actually working on this. So we actually put together our own protocol, which we've called for historical reasons eYang. And we're not a standards organization, so we're not going to make that be reality, but we brought it to the IETF, who have taken it on board and put it inside one of their green working groups. So we're quite hopeful that something will come out of that. And one last thing that's very, very new, this from last year, is we're very engineering focused as an organization. And so up till now, we've been, like all good engineers, only publishing things when we've dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, and we can reproduce the data a second time. We can stand up to scrutiny. But we've realized that the industry, the stakeholders out there, they're asking us, yeah, but what should I do? There was a few questions today. I don't know if that person is still there, but please fire your camera up and we can talk about it. And these are examples of the kind of recommendations we can give to all the different stakeholders. So the way we've cut this up, these 8 columns are the different groups of stakeholders. So the questions today were about end users, but what do we say to content providers? What do we say to ISPs? What do we say to mic and CDN people? What do we say to hardware makers? What do we say to the standards groups? What do we say to the regulators? What do we say to the other organizations like us that we work with? And so we've started filling that in. So this big red thing here is we haven't yet worked on CDNs in terms of recommendations. That's completely blank things. So that's there. But some of the columns are filling up a little bit, and the color coding here is green, as we've kind of been through one or two processes, and we're quite confident that we've got that right. Orange is we think that's probably the right idea, but it needs some more work. And when it's got no color coders, we haven't done the process yet for those ideas. And we have got other ideas that aren't on this table. But just to go through one as an example, it's a really simple thing. Ian, you know about this. We worked about this in the Ultra HD forum. Is the power consumption is heavily related to ambient light, and just maybe that something to make streaming greener would be for mass audiences to be aware of that. To all things being equal, if you can close the curtains, it's not spoiling your pleasure or your view. Draw some curtains, turn one of the lights off. You will actually bring the wattage down of your TV potentially by tens of watts. And it's better for your eye health too. And then there's a whole load of other things for users. I'll give you an example at the other end of the table. For example, for regulators, we're still working a lot on that. We've got an active working group. I'm really excited with a new member's just joined. Andrew Ladbrook is helping drive this. So this is going to be updated in the next few days and weeks. But for example, there's intellectual property rights that regulators don't necessarily make. It's the property bodies, but they could get involved and say, hey, just a minute, for regulation reasons, we are making people do multiple copies all over the world of certain files just to make, just to be safe for a licensing thing, when it makes no technical sense whatsoever. And we are talking about hundreds of petabytes of data being duplicated for regulatory reasons. So we've got, that was just to give you a diagonal thing. This box here I talked about, and this box down the two extremes. I could talk for 2 hours over any one of these boxes, but I'm going to leave it there. I hope you've promoted everybody who's still here to panelists, so that people can start turning their cameras on, those who want to have a little chat with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second. Just leave you with this slide is get involved, those who aren't involved, hopefully with us, but we're all about community and sharing, and it's much more important for us to work together in some way, shape or form, whether you join the Greening of Streaming as an organization or not. This is a community, and we're in it for the long haul, so we've got to work together. And I will stop sharing my screen, and I wasn't watching the Q&A, so I will now catch up on that. I loved what Barbara, in her talk, as she went away from sustainability, there was stuff on all sides of her life, and she went back to sustainability at the end. And Barbara, question for you, back to the early days, you said you were part of the digitalization of a whole industry. You worked in the digitalization of publication. That was several decades ago. Sorry, I'm not giving you a precise age, but we're both of the same generation. And I was part of the digitalization of other things. And sometimes when I think back, and there have been a few studies, say, on digitalization in the 70s, because it takes about 30, 40 years to do some of the studies. Who did it bring benefit to? And so if you think back at the digitalization of publication, the question is really simple. Do you think it brought any benefit, one, to society? Are we better off with a digitalized publication and stay with publication? And two, to the planet?
I think the answer is yes on both. I will say that the digitization of, in this case, academic content, so peer-reviewed research journals and articles and things of that sort. Digitization made it possible for people in every corner of the world, assuming they have internet. So that's a big if, but I think most people, well, I mean, I know there are people that still don't have it, but assuming you have internet, it broadened the access. It made it much more accessible. So I think In that regard, it was beneficial to those readers because they are able to access the technology, helps in their research, and I would say the long-term effect for humanity, for people, for I think you said society. I think the answer is yes, it's beneficial. Um, I think if you did a study on, the carbon footprint of printing content versus digital, I think the long-term effect would be that digital is probably a smaller footprint because printing, it's all the paper, it's all the manufacturing, it's the shipping, it's and some of these research journals, whether it's medical or otherwise, there's sometimes the paper that they used was pretty heavy. So, yeah, I think from a footprint point of view and from an accessibility point of view, I would think that that digitization did help.
It obviously democratized.
Democratized, yes.
And actually, it's interesting. You talk about print was democratized back a few years ago. We've got that now in the last 10 years with television and video. I think a lot of the discussion about is YouTube TV is based upon a misunderstanding of the reality of what television is.
Yep.
Television is, if you go back to the raw basics of it, as it was invented, it's vision at a distance. That's it. It's just what you put over it is a different definition. And so it's all TV. It's just whether is it reports? Is it a bit of gaming? Is it just watching somebody doing their gardening? Is it watching them doing a funny dance? Actually, that's
Cats,
content
cats,
discussion. That's a yeah, plenty of cats. The internet's been full of cats for decades. However, now we've got videos of cats rather than just photographs of cats.
right.
And I think
Oh,
the challenges for many people about the democratization is we discover an important point of democratization. If people are going to now get more involved, we also reveal the underside of mankind or person kind, yeah, about the reality of humans, and that's our area of problem. Is how do we manage those people who are not agreeable to the majority view, and how do we make sure the majority view is a good view?
I mean, I had a little bit of a hidden agenda there too. I mean, I was really interested in your answer for its own sake, but Ian and I have been working for many years with the Ultra HD Forum. I've also done some work with the 8K Association. I'm now working with Greening of Streaming, and so I have this sort of ethical, moral dilemma when it comes to video. Is that we know, for example, that HDR on average consumes about 15% more on the devices. We know that devices consume on average about 50%, or they generate about 50% of the carbon. So it wouldn't be crazy to think if HDR was kind of disappeared. I mean, if everything went HDR, we'd rise. Streaming would raise its environmental footprint by probably about 7%. But I don't necessarily want to push that narrative, because when I go back to the essence of video, why video exists on the planet and what it's doing is it's there to transmit human emotions. And most of us here are techies of some kind, or administrators of it. I don't know if anybody here is an artist that makes video, but I think those are the people who should have the say in whether HDR makes sense if we're to focus on it. And the same when you're talking about digitalization of publishing, of academic publishing. Even if the footprint was slightly bigger, if you're doing an amazing thing for humanity and democracy and accessibility, I mean, otherwise we'll just go and live in the trees. If everything that generates carbon is bad,
Right.
let's close this call now and all go home. So the question is, what are we allowed to? And in video, I still have this dilemma. I haven't yet had any clarity to help me have moral clarity on when I'm beginning to get a deep understanding. This is actually really energy intensive. Should I say so? And when should I say so and call out the red flag? And when should I not? Dom, I think, has done it more from an engineering perspective, and this is more energy there. But when you're talking about creating art in video, are we potentially going to be the harbingers of, not of doom, but of sort of, be some kind of techno nihilists by saying it uses more energy, therefore we should find another way of doing it?
Well, yeah, here's an interesting thing. to me, it's not just about efficiency; it's about effectiveness. It's sustainability about doing things, because you can't, for example, if you're cold, the fact that you use a lot of energy, with a heater, shouldn't is not part of the discussion. Totally, the discussion is that heater as efficient as it possibly can do, considering the job it has to be effective at doing. And I think that's what maybe that's the middle line I take in my sustainability view, is I'm not here to say what not to do and what to do. I'm here to look at the actual technology and go, is this the most efficient way of doing that? Is there ways of making it more efficient? And it goes back to that view I have very strongly, that sustainability is the fourth leg of the standard design triangle
Mm-hmm.
of
But
quality,
the
cost,
triangle, it's the design square then now.
yeah, it's a design square. In fact, I did refer to it as square in the triangle, or at least maybe the copy editor did that with the headline. But the key thing is that we use energy. The issue is, do we use it effectively and efficiently? And that does also answer the question that if we had completely 100% sustainable sources of energy, would we still be arguing about how much energy we're using? Well, actually, engineers would. They may not associate so much importance to it, but right now we have the opposite issue. At the moment, engineers do not put enough attention to the sustainability aspects of the products and services that we create. And it should be there as a basic requirement.
Just before
Dom
we
has
go
his
on,
hand up, FYI.
It's okay.
Sorry?
I'm used to Ben ignoring those.
Oh, sorry. But just before Dom, you'll be the next one to talk. But we've got Josh and Serian. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Perian.
Thanks. Could you just say who? I mean, I know Josh, but and I've met you by email. But do you want to just quickly present yourselves, who you are?
Sure.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So I'm Kerry-Ann Morgan. I work for HSBC. Recently had a chat with Dom. Very briefly met you, Ben, on a call. So just joined. I couldn't make the whole thing, I'm afraid. So I've only been on for like the last kind of 40 minutes or so. But yeah, just I work in Tech Net Zero at HSBC, trying to decarbonize our technology estate, which is vast, as you can imagine. But this is all quite new to me, so I'm kind of more in listening mode. But if I do have an opinion on HD, I would say when I watch an HD television, I think it makes it look very amateurish. I don't know why, but I kind of prefer a bit more of a 2D view, interestingly. But that's all I've got to say on that topic. I'll leave it there.
Well, I'm Josh Gordon. I know most of you already, but I'm on Planning Team 9 at the ATSC organization. And when I join calls like this, I feel like, boy, I live in the dark ages. A, I live in the United States, and B, I work for a broadcaster. So it's, these are very new ideas for the people that I travel with in my day-to-day functions. And I was kind of assigned this, and they said, figure this out. So I've been trying to do that for, I guess, about 1.5 years now. And progress is slow, especially at my end of the world.
Okay.
Well, if it's any help, it was in the US that the first reports of people tracking power factor on consumer devices occurred. Just so you know, you were first.
Also, just so you know, Josh, I'm active in an area called With Life, a whole With Life community, trying to look at the world, to kind of see it as the next step after sustainability, and most of it comes from the US.
Huh.
Some of the most active members. There's a lot of stuff happening in California and stuff. So you live in a very schizophrenic country.
There's no question about that.
Dom, you had your hand up for like the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, it was when you guys were talking about HDR and the impacts of sort of premium, let's call them premium technologies in the broadcast space. When I think back to doing my first webcast in 1996 and first streams, I needed a transit van full of kit to get on site, to then haul a satellite link because there was no broadband access where I was doing webcasts from So I was using the most enormous amount of infrastructure to essentially do the same thing that I can now do on my phone as a FaceTime. So one of the things that has interested me in watching the sustainability and energy footprint of streaming with a lot of attention over the last sort of 3-4 years. Obviously, point one, we don't have any real measurement. I still don't believe a single number I read anywhere, and so net zero, carbon calculators, all of that, it's just laughably, farcically, irresponsibly wrong. And I think that it's gone down a path of needing to justify circularity for the sake of justifying circularity, rather than because it has a purpose in actually making consequential change. I've harped on a lot about those issues over the years, but one of the things that also strikes me is without measurement, we can't really track what we can sort of instinctively see, which is, yes, infrastructures are getting massively over provisioned for the latest things, especially. But on the other side of it, some of those technologies have got orders of magnitude more efficient because of the demand. So if you create a big demand for HDR, for UHD, then you'll move off software and the consumer sort of cutting edge consumer technologies and start finding DSPs embedded in the TVs, embedded in the portable devices, which maximize battery life and so on. If you don't create a demand and actually have any adoption, then nobody's going to invest in that improved technology. So there's a sort of complicated catch-22. Sometimes you can get to a point where you could deliver 4 times the quality of video and use a fraction of the power that we used to use with MPEG-2 stream 30 years ago, because streaming is now adopted, or SD streaming is now adopted. So there's no reason why HD, HDR, UHD shouldn't become more energy efficient than anything available today if there is enough demand, enough technology investment, and enough innovation in that space. What would be terrible to get stuck in a grey zone where we've got inefficient technologies and nobody invests in them and nobody optimizes them. And what we should be doing as greening and streaming is, rather than trying to say we're a bigger problem than AI, we should be trying to have a bigger impact and use less energy than AI, and work on that innovation and invest in that strategy, rather than just try to always promote using less, because it's not going to work. The consumer is not going to stop streaming.
Yeah, you've hit on exactly the point, because that issue about the efficiency, the amount of additional energy required by HDR whilst displaying in HDR images, it's largely driven by the current implementations of the technology for displays that largely are purchased and bought by ordinary consumers, where actually you can't manage the reduced energy usage particularly well, because they're not designed for that. LED TVs are like the worst design you could ever think of for creating a display technology, because of the fact they're predicated on the fact that you generate lots of light first and then throw it away to generate the image, which is incredibly inefficient. And you're right, that needs to be dealt with. And interesting enough, a lot of people do lambast the EU regulatory bodies, but exactly that is how they are applying themselves to this. That's why 8K displays and TV display manufacturers had such an issue in 2021 about the suddenly not being allowed to import technologies into EU, is because they were warned by the EU, there are better technologies for displays out there, you need to implement them, otherwise we will remove certain allowances. And guess what? They didn't do anything, and therefore they had those requirements placed. So suddenly they had to scrabble around to work around the problem. But they still haven't solved the fundamental issue, and that is TV manufacturers at the moment are motivated to use the cheapest technologies for the most commonly bought TVs, because unfortunately consumers have bought into a price point for a display rather than actually the value point. And to characterize that, in 1985 it cost £300 for a TV. Today that's £1,400, and £1,400 today is literally 4 times what you buy a TV for.
I think to join that point and Kerry-Ann's earlier point about, I think you were referring to HD and 4K more, the resolution thing that gives that, especially the early days, the first shoots of 4K made it look a bit amateurish. We weren't used to it. I've lost my train of thought.
No, I think Kerry-Ann is also displaying an affection for a cinema look and feel. In other words, lower frame rate, slightly smeary content, rather than being incredibly highly precise and accurate, which
Yeah,
is
I
what
think you feel like you're sort of watching it and you're in it, but not in a kind of good way. And I think it's just not what I'm used to. It feels weird. So, do you know, but that is just a purely artistic
If there's
preference.
any help,
That-
if there's any help, it's probably your TV settings that are doing that, because they try to make use of the better displays now with the older content, and they do it really badly. So
Right.
follow
Okay.
Tom Cruise. Make sure you turn off all that adaptation that takes place, frame adaptation. Motion interpolation is what they refer to it as in very UIs, and you'll find it works a lot better. It's just
Interesting.
it's weird.
My train of thought has come back, and I don't know if you talked about it yesterday. I heard bits of MTTS, but fundamental issue, I think, in the whole of our industry, whether media tech, whether it's the people in all parts of the industry, including the telcos for the distribution part, all of us for the last 40 years at least, I've done a little bit of thinking about it. We've had this idea that whatever we can do, the tools we have and the business case we have, we always deliver the best possible experience. Whether that's the best possible image, the most pixels, the brightest colors, the most bandwidth. There are countries in Europe, several countries in Europe, where regular consumers can buy 10 gigabit connections. Nobody has a clue what they're going to be able to, and maybe one day we'll have 100 gigabit connections. We've never reached a point where we've said, well, actually, that's good enough. And so part of it's, I think, the business model we've had, that's been driving innovation and the way TV manufacturers work. One day I was really amazed. About 10 years ago, I was lucky to know the marketing manager of Sony Europe or something, and I said to her, how comes you have these like on the stickers that when you go into the stores, there's like 15 different things. We do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. The message is so complicated. How a consumer said, well, no, that's the whole, this was off the record, obviously. That's the way we do it. The more parameters there are there, the more confusion, the better. That's how we compete, and we make, that we can jack the prices up. Just, when 3D comes along, we'll do 3D. When 4K comes along, we'll do 4K. When 8K, we don't care whether it makes sense or not. The more, the business is making that. So there's business imperatives. The way our markets work is doing it for the devices. The networks are doing it. And also we're doing it with the images we create. And the thing, you do sometimes have artistic intent. I found when I was trying to promote 4K with French cinema makers, several of them said to me, no, take that realistic look away from me. I want a grainy image for 24. I want it to flicker. I want that's what I'm looking for artistically. But so there are some artists that will fight back, but the tech people, and the whole industry, we're just as good as we can all the time. And I think part of the solution, we've got to find a way, and looking at you, Barbara, who's thinking a lot about how to make our discourse intelligible to business people. How do we bring that? Because for today's business, the way they're structured, if we bring that message to market, we'll just get shot down as people you shouldn't listen to. We'll be problem people and not solution people. I don't know quite how to square that.
I had an experiment a year ago. I went to CES, the big consumer electronics show, and I visited all 10 the top 10 TV set makers. And I specifically wanted to see what their messaging was like regarding sustainability and all of that. And it was quite startling to see what was going on. The Chinese and Koreans were very aggressively pushing the sustainability message. Also, the bigger the better. Everyone had a big TV set, and it was like we've reached a point. One product manager told me where the TV sets have expanded to the point where they can't fit in most rooms. So that's the upward factor. But it's all about trying to get the consumer to buy something that they think is new and hot and is going to look great and all of that. Strangely, some set makers had no I said, when I went to the booth, they said, here, look us up online. We've got a whole sustainability website. Barbara.
For some reason, I can't find the hand raiser. I don't know where that went off. But so I've been dipping my toe into the Pro AV space, and it's quite different. It's much more advanced. So I went in terms of sustainability than the media tech. So if you look at ISE in Barcelona versus IBC, let's say, those are sort of, equivalent, and Infocom, which was last week, and NAB. And I've been to all four now. Well, I haven't been to IBC yet, but I will be. I've been to ISE, NAB, Infocom, and soon to be IBC. And two bifurcations. Europe, of course, doing more than in America, but the Pro AV community doing way more than the media tech sector. And I think it's because these companies are, because Sony is there, Philips is there, Sharp is there, all these display, Row Visual is, virtual production, virtual LED manufacturers, they're all there. But they are being driven by their customers. That's what I asked the question, because I wanted to understand why was Sony saying stuff about sustainability in Pro AV and not in the media market. And the answer is that their customers are asking for their sustainability records, right? And so I don't understand why they don't carry that over into the broadcast space as well. But I think that's maybe a motivation that we can do, right? Those of us who are in the communications side of things, is to help bring, that's why I tried to, yesterday I brought a Pro AV session to the MTSS and to try to bring more of that into our the media tech sector. The other thing is, the Sony person said, in Europe at ISE, we have a whole big thing about sustainability. Infocom, not so much. They just don't do it, right? And so, again, I don't understand. If you're going to do it in Europe, then just do it here too. But I think that's just I think they're being driven by their customers. And I think, we have something to learn from that. So.
Okay, well, that's deviated to the motivations for talking about sustainability. We haven't really addressed my question of quality, and we can close off with this discussion because we're getting to the end. Do we see any path towards being able to, could maybe greening of streaming one day say, this is good enough quality for streaming? So what's quality in streaming? It's all the technical parameters of the video itself, and to try and understand which of those parameters have sustainability impacts. There's the transport of it, there's things like, we've got used to now, when you get to Netflix on any device, on almost any network, and you press play, it's instantaneous. Just go back 10 years and everything would be at least a second delay. And everything's got, so one of my intentions of greening of streaming, as soon as we get CDNs up on our REM platform, is to say, is there any way of architecting a CDN that would make it much, much cheaper to run from an energy perspective, if it didn't have to always do everything instantaneously? So to try and think about everything's in what you call hot storage. If we put things in warm storage, and what does that have an impact on the energy and stuff like that? So what would be the parameters? We'd have to work out which quality parameters have a sustainability impact, and then say, well, what is good enough? Because we've gone from SD to HD to 4K to 8K, which is still not quite made it, but you can get 8K content. Are we going to go to 16K to 32K? Is there there are ways of explaining why 8K isn't the destination. The destination is somewhere in the 16 or 32K. There are arguments for HD. For example, if you take a prism on the quality of the video and say, there's one thing you could say, a lot of the energy consumed in streaming is to take a raw video, compress it, push it down a pipe, and uncompress it. So that compressing and uncompressing is a significant part of the energy. And the efficiency, let me get the right word in, I think it's efficiency, the right word I want here. The efficiency you get for taking a video and compressing it and then uncompress it will be much higher when you have a much bigger video. So the actual, if we just think in the absolute, just don't worry about reality for a minute. How many bits you can get pushed down to so many fewer bits. The more bits you start with, the more efficient that process is. From all perspectives, from energy, from time, from anything, there's a whole load more, the algorithm. So, if I have just 3 bits and I want to find a way of compressing them to 2, that'll cost me a certain amount of energy. If I have 3 terabits, I will do it. It won't be a tera times more. It'll be much more.
The problem is if you've got a 40 terabit network that's lit up all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference what your compression is.
The problem here is compression's got nothing to do with the energy usage at this point in time. And I think it's actually interesting because we had a little side discussion in the chat with Alethea. It's about understanding what we're actually putting across to people. We're displaying an image, multiple images over time to a consumer. And we've talked a lot about resolution, and actually a lot of content, even movie content, may be captured with a 4K sensor or a 6K sensor or an 8K sensor. But actually, it isn't actually, the content resolution is nowhere near that because of the way the creative has done their work. They've actually reduced purposefully the resolution of the content itself. And then when we take that content and put it into a distribution space to distribute it, we then compress it for that decompression and recreation on the screen. And that compression affects the resolution of the imagery. And the display at the end has got its own resolution. And the key thing to know, what you're actually seeing when you watch a TV program is not a 4K image, not a HD image. You're displaying an image at the resolution of a display, which isn't the same thing. And I think that's an interesting discussion point. And as opposed to that compression decision in distribution, TV manufacturer or television service operators have been making that decision in different ways for different countries now since the dawn of time. So in the UK, Sky, they push their Ultra HD services out at 30 to 35 megabits per second. I go to Holland, they do it at 25. I go to Portugal, and they're trying to do it at 12 to 14. And what's the difference between all of those? They're just different levels of compression because you can't change the laws of physics on the content. And the only way you're compressing it with a lossy compression system is by throwing stuff away, and therefore it's a lot lower resolution through the compression in reality terms. And then, of course, they show it up on a 4K display and expect it to look like 4K and wonder why the consumer says, I can't really see the difference. Because actually, by the time it gets there, in many instances, particularly not from the UK, it's not even close to 4K at that point. And people who are in the AV community know about this because they're still the ones buying Blu-rays. Because Netflix overcompresses as far as they're concerned. They need that nice, pristine 50 to 100 megabits per second service.
Okay, guys.
But that's a great discussion for another conference.
Yeah.
We've reached the end of our time, guys, and a few people have hadn't turned their cameras off, but they've dropped now. So I'd like to thank you all very much for staying till the end. I learned a lot from all the presentations. It was a great event for me, so thank you all very much.